Hello, National Youth Filmmaker Summit. My name is Dan Hudson. I am the Executive Director of NFFTY, and I am so happy to be with you this evening. Before we get started, I do want to thank the National Endowment for the Arts, who are our lead funder for launching this new program this year. Huge shout out to them. And a very special thanks to the American Film Institute, who are the presenting sponsors of this session in particular. I'm very sad to say that Anna Prue, who was going to be the moderator and host for today's session, is not able to join us. So you get me. Sorry, not sorry, because I'm actually super excited about this panel and I really am looking forward to having a conversation with them. For accessibility purposes, I am a white male in my 30s with a bald head and a beard and wearing a colorful patterned shirt with little popsicles on it. And I am going to go ahead and invite our 5 filmmaker panelists to go ahead and unmute yourselves and turn your cameras back on. And why don't we go in the order of Winter? Why don't you introduce yourself first?
Hello, I hope everyone's doing all right tonight. My name is Winter Reese, Winter with a Y. I am a writer-director, like many of the folks here, and I'm really excited to hear what everyone has to say. I think it's a very important discussion to have. Thank you.
Yeah, Cal, why don't you go next? You're next on my little screen here.
Hey everyone, my name is Cal Moreno. I am a Latinx writer-director originally from Baltimore, Maryland, and currently living in Los Angeles and San Francisco. So yeah, excited to be here. Thank you for having us.
Lauren, why don't you go next?
Hello, I'm Lauren Meyering, and I'm a writer-director in Los Angeles. Yep, I think that's it.
Awesome. Ethan.
Hey guys, I'm Ethan Seneker. I'm based in Seattle and I like to make movies. And I'm a white guy wearing a black shirt.
Welcome, Ethan. And not last, but certainly not least, Ian.
Hello, I'm Ian. I am a filmmaker, creative director, 30-year-old skinny Korean dude in a basement studio with a blue sweater.
Love it. I'm so excited that the 5 of you are able to join us this evening. We're going to be getting into all the big questions about like success. What does it mean? What does it actually look like? And of course, you've all were talented young filmmakers screening with NFFTY at some point over the past few years, and want to make sure that, oh, Winter, you have a hand up. Do you have something to say? I want to make sure that
I totally forgot to do my descriptor because I have really bad ADHD.
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
I'm wearing gold earrings. I'm a young native girl. I got my cheetah print dress on and I have a map of Tokyo behind me and I have a little curly Q hair and my hair's in a low bun and I'm wearing a eye necklace.
The short answer is Winter looks fabulous as always the best dressed. Well, sweet. Yeah, I mean, like the other kind of half of that equation is like success can mean different things at different stages of your career. And also, what does it mean to be a young person in the industry, where sometimes that is seen as a real positive, sometimes there can be a little discrimination or a little ageism, or people aren't giving you the respect that your work clearly shows. So where I want to dump in is a question for everybody. What was the year or maybe age or maybe grade in school that you felt really confident in being able to self-identify as like, yeah, I'm a filmmaker now? Like, was it a particular project? Was it just an attitude? Like, I want to hear from everybody on this question. I'm going to start off with Ian because you're next up on my screen here.
Oh, well, Okay, so I was bitten by the filmmaking bug in 7th grade when I made a class project, and it was just the most fun I'd ever had in my entire life. I think I decided I want to dedicate my life to this craft in high school, and I had a lot of imposter syndrome. Starting out, I sucked. All my work was terrible, which was naturally so. I will say maybe the first time I was feeling self-affirmed that I could do this was when maybe 6 years later, when I made a short film that for the first time kind of met my expectations, and a lot of people saw it and applauded me, and I won a national award, and it was amazing. Not to say that that's a requirement to get to a place of feeling self-confidence. I think I still feel like an imposter a lot of times. So it's an ongoing process, I will say.
Awesome. Cal.
Yeah, kind of similar to you, Ian. I never grew up as like a cinephile. I wasn't watching a ton of movies. I kind of just like fell in love with making movies. I think I made like a video for my chemistry class in sophomore year and had nothing to do with chemistry. It was just fun to make it with my friends. I guess it's still, yeah, sometimes I still feel weird saying I'm a filmmaker. I would say when I finally went to USC and I moved like 3,000 miles across the country, to go to school, I started to feel like a filmmaker, but I also had that imposter syndrome, and like I felt like more like a student. I still kind of feel like a student. But I think once you make a body of work that you're really proud of, that's when it kind of sets in. And you're like, oh, I can do this. Like, well, hopefully I can do this. So yeah.
Thanks. Lauren.
I'd say I definitely was always playing, it's like the classic answer of like, I always played with my family's video camera, but I was doing that. And I was super nerdy and recreated the Twilight baseball scene with my friends shot for shot. And, figured out how to do slow-mo on that camera and things like that. But, that was like when I was in middle school. But I think for me, when I finally realized I was going to, dedicate my life to film was when I attended something that's kind of similar to NFFTY, but it was called Film Ed Academy as a high schooler. And I would make videos. And I just remember my psychology teacher, who I looked up to a lot, told me, she was like, yeah, I feel like, if my psych teacher, basically, like, I had a video play on our school broadcast, and she was like, I can always tell when it's a video you made. Like, I don't even have to see the credits, because I just know that if it's a good video, you made it. And it was just such a compliment to me from someone I really respected. And I was like, okay, I think I really want to pursue this, because genuinely I don't really have any other passions other than film. So yeah.
That's as good enough a reason to stick with anything. Winter, what about you?
Oh, this is a really great question, Dan. Like some of the other folks said, I did not grow up, like obsessed with any particular filmmakers or directors, anything like this, but I always had a very like a morbid attraction to the idea of like the polarity between the really, really good things and the really, really terrible things that people do to each other. Like, I thought I was so edgy when I was like 8. I would like walk around like the downtown city, because I'm also in Seattle here. I would like ask people like, what's the hardest thing they've been through, and I'd like write it down. And definitely that has always been a dance where journalism and film intersect for me. Big opening moment would probably be when my grandma, she like would take pictures a lot, and she always told me like that the camera can see things like that, we just can't really see with our naked eye. But I was very disappointed that the pictures weren't moving. So I knew that, okay, we have to go for something where these pictures are moving. And to keep the question short, I'm gonna flop this back over to Ethan, because Ethan was probably there for like pretty much like one of the main times that I was like, all right, we can really do this. Right before me and Ethan created like my first short film together, there was a camp called Real Girls, I think. And we all just had to make like a 30-second film, whatever, right? And so then when it was watching, I thought, that's interesting. That's weird. They're also great, but this one feels distinct. Why does this feel like something that I feel like I could mimic again, or have a style in a similar way again? Long story short, after that, it got like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation do this thing where they like ask like young kids like to like do a talent show. And that's when I froze up on stage. I realized, okay, I'm definitely not an actress because I couldn't function. I got up there and I was like, and yeah, from there, me and Ethan did a little short film where we like guerrilla style jumped over a fence and like, you know, was like checking out for when the evil farmer was or wasn't working at this location so that we could shoot this this creepy film there. Do you have anything to add to that, Ethan?
Yeah, I mean, I can go into the question as well here. I mean, me and Winter actually grew up in the same area and went to the same high school. And so I was already, I'm a bit older than Winter, so I was kind of doing some films already when we met, and sort of was able to help out with her stuff, which is super cool. But for me, honestly, making movies, I was really lucky that my dad just loves movies growing up. So I was exposed to movies and also film festivals. I mean, first, started, my dad had cameras, you know, just like you, Lauren. And it was just like a fun thing to do with friends, but also an excuse to hang out with girls or, you know, just like little things like that. It was always about the experience for me, and it still is. Almost to a detriment, I think, versus like experience versus final product kind of thing. But the defining moment, I think, this is not an advertisement, but I've gone to NFFTY every year since 2008. And it was either 2009 or 2010. I saw Sparks in the Night, which is one of Ben Katie's first movies, at one of the screenings. I hadn't met Ben Katie yet or anything. I just saw it and I was like, wow, someone a year older than me made this. That is so cool. And that was like the moment, like, I want to dedicate a lot, like as much energy as I can to doing that, to making something that then I can show people like what I did. And then from there, obviously it develops into a cathartic process, something more so to do because you need to do it, or to understand yourself better or understand the world better, doing it more for yourself than for other people. And I think that's where the biggest transition came. Yeah.
I love that. All right, I'm going to dive into another question for everybody. And I'm going to come first to Lauren this time because I want to mix it up, keep y'all on your toes. I think that one thing that's just like kind of human nature, like regardless of whether or not you're working in an industry like film, is, you know, kind of looking to see where you are like in relationship to your peers. Maybe before you might have like had a chance to work in like LA or study perhaps film school in a bigger city. You know, that might have meant like, you know, who was around you at the time that had an interest in making film. And I'm wondering like this, there's like this, always this like big fish in small pond, or like small fish in the big pond sort of thing. And like, that can kind of mess with your head a little bit as far as like your sense of self and your sense of like self-worth and everything. So I know that's a big question, but I want to throw it to you first, Lauren, and then I want everybody to have a chance to respond to that idea.
So the question is like, how did that like affect, or like what environment? Sorry,
Yeah.
Lovely question. I just to narrow it down. What
yeah. Let me reframe it a little bit tighter here. So it's like how do you know, within like, you know, smaller circles or larger circles, or like kind of, you know, moving into, you know, LA or like a bigger sort of like job market, like how do you kind of maintain your sense of self, or like how do you kind of like view how you like judge yourself against where other people are at that, you know, might be kind of similar in age to you, or like kind of similar education level? Or
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Great. It was very interesting that you said the like big fish, small pond kind of thing, because I genuinely, the moment I knew I wanted to do film, I was like, I want to go to Chapman Film School. That's my dream. Like, that is where I'm going. It was the only school I applied to. And then I had one backup school, but I had an in-person interview. I toured the school. Like, literally, it was all I wanted. I, you know, checked every box as far as, you know, going so beyond hard in the extracurriculars. And then I got waitlisted, and I just remember feeling like the world was ending. And all of my friends who did film got into their dream schools. And I just remember being like, oh, great, you know, this is where it ends for me, which is so not true. And I went to my backup school, which was genuinely, I went there because I got a ton of like financial aid and scholarships, but it was like this small religious school. And I didn't even know if they had a film program. And they did. And it's so funny because looking back now, I genuinely believe if I had gone to a school like Chapman, I would have never said out loud that I wanted to be a director. And in my film school that I went to, we had like 12 people in our class. And so I felt a lot more confident in saying like, I think I want to be a director, because I was like, I know everyone says that, it's cliche, whatever, but it, in a way, and you know, I can retrospectively look back and be like, I definitely think I would have just like not said that if I'd gone to a bigger school. And then in going, you know, beyond that, so that was helpful, and it like I was able to, you know, establish my people and find my voice and things like that. But I don't work with anyone from that school anymore, unfortunately, like maybe one. Everyone else didn't really go on to pursue it. But I just remember thinking like, okay, you know, I don't have like a clear path. I don't have like the, you know, no one in the industry, no cool, you know, uncle. I don't have, you know, the stamp of like, oh, you went to this amazing school. So I was like, I'm just going to follow a path of like someone who I really respect. And Joe Sill, who he actually taught me when I was in high school. I got coffee with him, and you know, he's telling me about his route, and like he did a lot of commercials, and he still does commercials and things. And I just remember thinking, okay, that's what I have to do. And I tried really hard, and I realized like it's so, there is no one way to, I don't even want to say like be successful, but there's no one way to like navigate this. And I kind of wish I could go back and tell myself that, because I did so many painstaking music videos and commercials, making no money, you know, trying to do all these things. And maybe that is the route for some people, but I know now in where I am, I'm like, man, that was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears for things that I'm not super proud of, you know, a lot of demos that I'm not, you know, really proud of. And in a way, I'm like, if I hadn't compared myself and tried to mimic someone else's path, I think I would have like understood that I really am a writer first, and like, you know, kind of figured that out sooner. But instead I did 4 years of like literally not being able to pay bills, trying my hardest, like, you know, just trying to do the most and do what other people around me were doing. When in reality, it wasn't until the pandemic where I finally stopped and slowed down, and I realized like, oh, wait, I don't have to be doing what everyone else is doing, because the second I sat down and wrote a script, that's ultimately what got me signed and where I am. And I just didn't do that for the first 4 years because I was so focused on everyone else and what they were doing. So that's a very, very long ramble answer, but yeah, I would say, you know, keep your peers close by and like continue to work with them. But just because someone is doing something specifically that they're good at, or like finding a way, doesn't mean that you're going to find the same success that they are in the same way.
I love that. Ian, I'm gonna come next to you, because I know there's a Joe Silk connection there, but I also I think that your story, like landing at LA and getting started, is like super fascinating. So I'm coming to you next here.
Oh man, well, whew, it's been quite a ride. It probably the same goes for a lot of us. But before I forget, Lauren, I'm curious to ask you, you know, like what caused that aha moment, because I found myself full circle kind of in the same trajectory, I guess. When I was younger, you know, the reason I got into this was because I freaking just loved the process of filmmaking. It was incredibly joyful. It's the most fun thing I've ever done in my life. Somewhere along the way, I think it's around college and going into the real world, when you realize you need to like essentially like just get by and make money and survive, it becomes, at least for me, I think in the first like year or two, it was a lot of struggle. I had so much idealism of like, I'm gonna go out and change the world and make the greatest film of all time. And, you know, at the time in the first year after college, I was essentially getting paid almost nothing, living in a basement tool shed, spider webs above me, like almost no food, like this like starving artist lifestyle for about definitely a good 6 months, definitely longer than that. Very naively went to LA without any job or internship or anything lined up. Where I met Joe Sill. And we started working together a lot, and one thing led to another. And I think the mentality at the time was just to say yes to everything, like yes to everything, to just meet people, get work done. And I think somewhere along the way, I will say, I don't know. I don't know where the shift happened, but I started to pay attention more to status and just comparing myself to where other people are at versus doing what I truly love to do. I think the reason I first got stuck in that rut was because the necessity just to make money from jobs. And so it was kind of this like, I need something, please. And then getting out of that, I think has required a certain level of, okay, I said yes to everything, get a certain amount of money, get to a certain place. And then it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you got to take care of basic needs. Like that's just a fundamental need for everybody. You have to have shelter, you have to have food, you have to have a good support system. And I think that's something I wish I had known earlier, like coming out of college, where it's like, hey man, you're not gonna go to the tippy top of this Maslow hierarchy of needs and self-actualize in the first year after graduating. You know, you got to kind of learn the ways. So anyways, all that to say, I feel like I'm only recently coming back around to my true self and center, where, you know, after I've solidified like these first couple levels, I'm re-asking myself, like, what am I really curious about? Like, what do I want to do? Like, I have been making work for other people for a while now, but like, I'm kind of curious to just like, maybe take some time, like go to the forest and like read some books that pique my interest in the library. So all that to say, I don't want to make it sound like it's some terrible journey after college where you're going to go through years of what I did. I'm making it sound worse than it really was. It wasn't that bad. I'm kind of dramatizing it, but I think I don't know. I'll speak to some tangible things that just help me find that center. I think one is staying away from social media. I'm barely on social media. I like barely post stuff. It just like gets in my head about what other people are up to. And then I just like to have a lot of quiet time. I think that just helps me center and kind of go into myself and ask myself, is this coming from fear, or is it coming from like a love and like a drive, like a passion? And once you have a silent space and you can go inward and kind of ask yourself that, usually the answer is pretty clear. So that's, as I've gotten older, protecting that safe space and that groundedness has become really crucial. And I wish I kind of tapped into that at an earlier age too, because I think right after college I had a lot of that craving, that like craving energy versus like expansive, like loving energy, like a passionate energy. So I don't know if that necessarily answered the question, but that's my 2 cents of my experience so far.
There's a lot of gems in there. That was great. That was more than 2 cents. That was the whole dollar. Cal, I'm gonna come to you next with this one.
Yeah, so I kind of have the other perspective of Lauren. So I ended up going to the big film school. I went to USC, and honestly, it was hard, and that definitely affected my confidence a lot. You know, as great as a school it is, and I met some of my closest collaborators, it's cutthroat, and you know, you're constantly comparing yourself to others. And you talk about this panel, like you're like, how do you not compare yourself to your idols? Like, I never saw that the problem. Those were always people like, oh, sweet, that's awesome, but like my peers, that was the hardest part, you know. And I can't speak highly enough to, you know, what Ian said about staying off social media, because that I'm still so anxious with that, you know. And I went through some dark moments this year, and I'm very pro therapy and mental health, so I definitely agree with that. But I think one thing I learned being a small fish in a big pond was that the barriers to entry in this industry are very different for a lot of people. You know, and I came from the East Coast, where no, you're either like a doctor, engineer, or lawyer. You know, like your parents didn't even take you to museums. You know, and you know, coming 3,000 miles and like, you know, not really having any context, like, you know, not knowing anyone whose parents were this or that, and you know, that was really hard for me. And I think in this past year, and I'm not there yet. I would say I'm definitely still working on this and working on not comparing myself to my peers. But I think what I learned was, you know, one, I'm happiest when I'm working on my own projects and just focusing on my own stories. That's when I'm happiest. And two, because the barriers of entry are so different for, every individual, if you can make the best with what you got, that's all you can be happy for. And I wouldn't say I'm even there yet, but I'm trying to work towards that in this current situation. So yeah.
Love that. Ethan, I'm coming to you next here. I find it you interesting also in particular here, because you do, you came from Seattle, but you also identify as still being like based in Seattle. Are you splitting time between LA and like kind of what was the, what's the kind of like dichotomy? Because those are two very different markets and kind of two very different scenes, as it were.
Yeah, totally. I definitely relate to Ian a lot on his trajectory. Coming out of high school, I did have like a really great network. I was lucky through NFFTY and through a lot of just doing film festivals and having doing a film every year and going to festivals and meeting lots of people. But slowly realizing that a lot of the people my age making movies, also, they had the resources really to do that. And so when I got out of high school, I didn't have the resources financially to go to a 4-year film school or do that, because I had to start paying all my bills when I was 18. So I also, like Ian, moved straight to LA because I wanted to make movies still and had kept doing that, and just wanted to keep that alive. And everyone else I knew was going off, to all the film schools and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to still be a part of it, and not, be depressed in gloomy Seattle. So I moved to LA right out of high school, and I lived there for 7 years. I didn't move back to Seattle until like right when maybe like 6 months after COVID started. Just because I was able to work remotely and all my family was here. I recently saw something. It's like, by the time you're 18, you've spent 90% of the time that you're ever going to spend with your parents, and things like that, of just like my siblings are here. And so it really felt right for me to come back, also because I was the most creative in my life when I lived here. And I think that goes directly to the pressure and the weight of having to face the world, all those real life responsibilities. It's really difficult to isolate that mindset and really focus on your stories and immerse yourself the way you need to really make really rich worlds and characters and all the things that go into writing or telling a story. It makes it hard when all you're thinking about is, okay, how do I make money? How, what's the next gig that's coming? So when I moved to LA, I was PAing for years. And then eventually I became an assistant, and I worked as a personal assistant basically for a few years. And then I just got sick of it. And I was like, I really need to do my own thing. And I had been producing things for other people, and just because I wanted to be a part of the project, for people who actually had the resources to make movies, to do all these things. And I think it really burned me out because I spent all my time supporting other people rather than myself. And through movies, is you just grow so much as a person when you are focusing on your own stories. And so I think I really stunted my own growth by just wanting to be a part of it, and that desperation that Ian was talking about, like setting in. So I mean, but that also, built a skill set that I was able to then leverage, and started a little like production company, like agency in 2016, that then I built up to 2018. And then in 2018, I was able to start doing that full time. And so I haven't had to do work in this as an assistant or a production manager or producer outside of my own thing, which is nice because I get to set my own schedule and commit to only things that I want to commit to. But also, it's hard running a small business, and it's hard making the time to still work on your stories in the same way, that you it's hard to do it. So right now I'm just really just trying to carve out that time. And in order to do that, you really need to be in a healthy place, a healthy mindset, feel that stability financially, but also emotionally. is the most important part. Like Cal was saying, I mean, you just got to be in that good place where you can sit down at your desk and just meditate, or just be able to clear your mind and think about what's important, or just journal and use filmmaking as a tool to further understand yourself and the world around you, and just really only focus on things that you're truly in love with. Because I think you can only make really great work if you're absolutely in love with it. It's just too long of a process to not be. So.
Winter, I'm seeing a lot of just like reactions from you here on my screen. So I know that there was a lot of great stuff covered there, but I know you got some gems too and some perspective to add to this.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, first of all, it's a really just amazing testimony so far from everybody. I kind of like a very unique experience with all of this. About my fears and my not fears. I am on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. So there is a chance that this is just like that level of factual thinking, but I was always very sure of what I want to do in a very matter of fact way. Like, the sky's blue, my hair is black, I'm a filmmaker and I'm a natural, right? And so there's this weird thing of like, sort of like when you're always made to feel like a small fish, you're not so scared of the big pond, if that makes sense. My fear was more that, not that I wasn't built for filmmaking, but that the industry wasn't built for me. I was petrified of this entombing doom of like never being discovered and just like dying, and then people finding like all of the stuff someday and being like, oh man, this would be so good, just like happened with so many artists, right? I was much more afraid of that. I mean, think about some of the best coders in the world are at some distant part of rural India, and it's like there's so many people around the world that are just undiscovered. And in my particular case, not coming from money in any sense of the word, I was thinking like, well, I don't need college, right? I think when you can't have something, you kind of, in a form of self-defense, tell yourself, I don't need that. So I told myself, I don't need college. Finally, one day, my mom, Raven, she was like, will you just will you calm down? She was like, here, it's gonna be a no if you just like don't live, you literally just don't try. And so I would apply to a bunch of different colleges and apply. And sometimes, right, I would get like a partial scholarship or part of a grant or something. And I would always have to tell people, thank you so much, but I can't. Thank you so much, but I can't. I really appreciate this, but I can't. And then one day I was in the Bronx in New York, and I had a bad Wi-Fi connection there, and I got reached out from Savannah College of Art and Design, and they were like, hey, so we're considering you and 10 other people for this scholarship that we give out every 9 years. Are you free for a Skype call? And I was like, oh my God, I can't do a Skype call because the Wi-Fi was too bad. So I was like, I can do just a phone call. Is that cool? They're like, yeah. I remember this distinctly. It was like a 6.5 minute phone conversation. And I remember hanging up and being like, oh my God, what did I just do? Like, what did I do? And it was crazy because the next day they emailed me back and they said, hey, after much consideration, we've decided to go with you. So that was definitely like a life-changing moment for me because, education is life-changing for all people of all different socioeconomic backgrounds. But in my particular case, it was like really very shocking. Like this was like going to be like a huge, massive shift. So I hope that answers your question. It was just a big jump, very crazy. And like Ethan said, finding out really what you really want to do, being there made me realize the extreme juxtaposition between, not always, but sometimes, the filmmaker mind and the writer mind. And it made me realize that even though filmmaking and writing scripts from a directorial point may be a thing, I definitely love and I'm constantly humbled by writers all the time. I'm humbled by writers all the time. I'm amazed by writers, and I definitely wanted to be around writers. So that college opportunity gave me that epiphany.
I love that. All right, I got another question for everybody, and I'm coming to Cal first this time because I don't think we started with you on a question yet. Besides recognition at NFFTY over the years, you've all had some like marker of industry recognition, whether that be like winning awards at film festivals or like maybe some other sort of opportunity or recognition that, you know, is traditionally thought of as like a big deal in the industry. But they all kind of have like different weights and kind of different meanings. And maybe this kind of relates back to maybe our earlier question of like, kind of like, yeah, I am a filmmaker now. So yeah, I'm just wondering, like, you know, as far as like the markers of success in the industry, or like the sort of like, you know, things that are traditionally supposed to like make you feel like you're arriving or moving forward, what has actually meant the most to you personally? Like, you know, maybe those two are incongruent. Maybe there's some other experience or something that you've had that actually brought you a connection to somebody that you're collaborating with, or I don't know, something. This question I kind of grapple with, because I hear all the time from some people. It's like, well, actually, like I went to this thing and it was supposed to like be really great, but it did nothing for me. But this other smaller thing like actually really meant something to me. So Cal, I'm starting with you here on this.
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I mean, I think there's like the natural markers of success, like you said, like festivals and stuff like that. And I think one of those big ones for me was when Panavision wanted to fund my last film. And that was a very cool opportunity. And allowed us to take my film to a level I didn't think we could take it, which was awesome. But I would actually credit those kind of moments. I've had it happen 3 times, where I've had people like watch my body of work and they just be like, hey, like, I really believe in you and I support you. And the way they say it, it's different than just like, oh, I like that film. It's like, oh, I believe in you. And those moments were always very powerful for me, because I feel like, yeah, I've gone through a lot of that imposter syndrome. And like, you know, like I said, it's still kind of weird being called a filmmaker or an artist. You know, it's like, so when people be like, oh, I want to invest in you and I believe in you, those kind of instances have kind of like stuck with me over the years. And I kind of try to hold on to those, because it's like those dark moments where you're like, oh, this sucks. You're like, you know, this is dumb. You know, I just like, oh, someone at one point didn't think this was dumb, and you know, someone's rooting for you. So I think it's just those small personal connections, like you said. And you know, I've gotten them from film school, I've gotten them from high school friends, I've gotten them, you know, just from strangers. You know, you don't really know where they're going to come from, I'd say.
Love it. Winter, I'm coming back to you.
Let me think about this. Markers of recognition and what meant the most to us, even if it was smaller than other things. Okay. In that case, I'll just talk about the meaningful things and not so much the big things that didn't affect me or were maybe more disappointing than you like expect them to be. I would say there's two major moments. One was after one of those earlier films, a little bit after the one Ethan and I did, probably film 2 or 3, short film. We had brought in a what do you call it? A stadium, not a stadium, a theater, filled the theater with people. It was really, really exciting to have had for the first time access to so many real extras and not have to figure out how to do that in the background. And every single person in that seat made that film possible, right? So I'm not acting all high and mighty. Like every single person in those seats are extremely important. That scene would not have worked without them. And it was very profound and powerful. And when we were leaving, everyone was kind of like shooing out the people, but there's these people kind of like looking, like especially a lot of young girls, young men, young people. And I was like, no, like, you know, the day's over, everyone else can go home, but like, you know, I'm good to stay here. And there's a line of like 40 or 50 kids that were like waiting in line to talk to me. This blew my mind. Like this literally blew my mind. I never like even thought about that before. So that was extremely powerful. And I'm still connected to some of those young kids today who are growing right as we speak into their own careers. The second thing would definitely be, I had a really awesome mentor, one of my professors at SCAD, who basically told me, you can't open a film, because we were in a very intensive screenwriting, feature writing class, and this at the time was my 2nd or 3rd feature script I had written. And he was like, you can't open a film with a sex scene that brutal. Like, you just can't do that, right? And so then I was like, yeah, you know, I'm just gonna write it, and then if I'm wrong, that's okay. Like, I will take that, no problem, no offense. And so I wrote it, and he was like, expletive, you're right, all right, fine, you're right, whatever, you're right, you know. And the class was like, oh, you're right, you know. And I think a lot of times people tell a lot of filmmakers, right, or writers, right, that you can't possibly make a film about this plus this and this at the same time, right, or you can't do this and this. But I think as long as you really mean it, that's the key, like Ethan was saying, as long as you really, really mean it, I think breaking those rules can only result in good. So yeah, I would say those are 2 moments. be a wolf, don't be a sheep, says my awesome boyfriend who's sitting over there right now in the chat.
I love that. Ian, coming to you next.
I think it's pretty similar when you connect with someone who connected with the work you did, and you connect on a personal level, and they, you know, share why they were so affected. And I mean, it's funny because so I worked at this company, Jubilee, where I remember we reached this milestone, 1 billion views. And I clearly remember thinking to myself, like, that doesn't mean anything. It's just a number. Like, because you're at the screen looking at data essentially. And obviously there's a lot of good decisions informed by data, but we had this one party with subscribers where we invited folks to come out, and this was pre-pandemic times. And I remember just interacting with folks. And there was this one woman who, well, more than one, they somehow just stumbled upon our video on YouTube. And we have this series called Middle Ground, where people get together and of opposing views and kind of share their dialogue about a given subject. And one was about abortion, and this woman was talking about, I think she was about to get an abortion and stopped because of that video. And I was like, oh my God, like that that hit me. And obviously not making it a issue of, you know, abortion right or wrong, just the fact that someone was able to feel like they found their truer self as who they are because of something that we had created struck me pretty hard. So that was a notable moment.
I love that. Oh, Winter, are you coming in? I saw a hand.
Real quick thought to piggyback off of this is it's crazy the responsibility that we as filmmakers have, right, to potentially change people's life-altering decisions, you know, because I knew one person who's extremely this is a story they told me later in life, they were extremely homophobic, extremely, to a point where they made it their mission to hate on anyone different than them. And then a film made them realize that they themselves were not only gay, but were interested in the process of, you know, beginning the process of being trans. And so, yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there. It's really phenomenal, the power that film and the media we consume has on everybody's lives.
Oof. Lauren, Ethan, who's going to follow that up? That's powerful stuff. All right, Lauren, I think you're saying Ethan's up. Sorry, Ethan, got to follow that.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, for me, it's always, I was inspired to make movies because I am so emotionally moved by films all the time. And I think stories is the ultimate form of communicating to people. And I get emotional every time I watch a good movie. So I would say for me, it's learning the language of stories or filmmaking, or just understanding that experience and how powerful the experience and relationships you make can be. It's me on the opposite end, being able to talk to other filmmakers and connect with them about their movies or about their lives and what inspired them, and being able to like understand or connect to their journey getting to that place, why they made it in the first place, or how it changed over the process and evolved. Really is an emotional thing for me, and I feel like it's another level of connecting to someone. And then also on the other hand, every summer I volunteer as a mentor, a film mentor to kids. And I mean, like you guys were saying already, just seeing a kid or seeing someone be so in love with anything, but especially movies, you always will see yourself in that, and that seeing that inspiration and just the pure love for something that you also love, it really, I think, at least helps me appreciate it in a way that helps bring it back to what's most important about it, or why it's important to you, because it's important to everyone in a different way.
I love this through line of like of mentorship and the connection with like that just like a few people responding to the work. That's great. Lauren. Now it's your turn.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm just gonna keep going off that theme, I guess. But yeah, for me, it was like I just felt like, in regards to, what the things that the accolades that you get, it's like I just remember again comparing myself, seeing friends getting Vimeo staff picks and friends getting into these crazy big film festivals. And I just always was like, man, I feel like I feel like I know I'm good, but based on everything I've ever done, I'm like, I've never gotten one of those, and I'm like, in my mind, that's what success was. And like, even just like, competitions and things like that, where it's like, I'd like enter and be like, I think I have a great shot. And then just nothing, and it was so funny because like, for me, when I got a kind of like a pinnacle like stamp of success in 2020 when my script landed on the blacklist. And like, I just remember I didn't know what it was. And I joked because I was like, this is the reason I got on, is because I didn't submit because I felt like my whole life I was like trying to do things. And then when I just like did my own thing, didn't put it out there at all, was like when it got that like stamp of recognition. But it was so funny because while that's like, woohoo, yeah, big, you got your thing, you got your gold star of like, whatever, it didn't mean as much to me as when I had I think I had just finished my freshman year at college and, still feeling like that little bit of a failure because I was going to this school that I didn't like and all these things. And the man who ran Film at Academy asked me to come back and teach. And I was so confused because I was like, you really like me? Because they asked like 4 people. And I was so confused because, my teacher was Joe Sill, like I had these people that I had like on a pedestal. And when he asked me, I was like, I can't offer anything. Like, there's no way. And to this day, I mean, literally even up till last summer, I'm still teaching there, it's like, and Dave, who runs the program, is like, yeah, Jez was my student. But to this day, like Dave, who runs the program, he'll be like, I'm going to ask you back for the summer. You can always say no. I'm like, every year when he asks me, I'm still honored. I'm still confused. I'm still honored. And that to me means so immensely so much more, that he saw me as like a person who was not only like a good filmmaker, but a teacher too. It's like, it's genuinely those things that are like the most rewarding for me. And tying in kind of what Ethan said too, it's like, getting a student who they have this breakthrough. And we did it a year virtually. And I had a kid who literally messaged me, who was in my group. He was like, hey, I'm kind of in a creative rut right now. So like, I don't know if I'm going to submit anything. So there were a lot of like film assignments. And I was like, hey, I totally understand, just try. I think it's, we got to push ourselves, just, genuinely trying to like give him some pep talk. And he ended up making this phenomenal music video that went on to win Best Music Video at the Orange County Film Festival. And he like messaged me. He's like, I just wanted to say, like, I'm so glad you like basically like helped me through that. And I like just screenshotted that message, was like, I could frame this and put it on my wall, because that meant like so much more to me than anything else. And it's just things like that where you're like, I kind of, Dan, you were saying about the mentorship, but it just is that thing where you're like, I had no idea that, the little pep talk I gave you meant so much. But in the same way, when you're a student and you like get those words from someone else, you're like, wow, this is really impactful. And you forget that those kinds of things stick with you. So, yeah.
Man, I love that. Oh man, there's so much love. There's so much love in the room tonight. Oh man, this is like so much sweeter and lovelier than I even thought it was going to turn into. Well, I shouldn't be surprised. You're all such sweet, lovely people already. Man, I kind of have time for just like one more, and like I'm really waffling on which one to go for. But all right, I'm gonna go for this one because this is kind of plays a little bit with kind of like how we put together this like event description, where it's like one other way that maybe inspires you to start out. Even I know some of you were like, yeah, I didn't like necessarily have like a filmmaking idol like that made me want to become a filmmaker in the first place. But you know, in this kind of continuing this thread of like, you know, it's the people that you work with that, or the people that you've had an opportunity to, you know, to either be mentored by or mentor, that kind of stuck with you the most. And I'm kind of wondering like that there's this kind of this what's the word I'm looking for? It's like there's like this idiom out there, which is like, don't ever meet your idols, you know, like you're going to be like disappointed or whatever. But I'm wondering if there is anybody that you like admired or whose work you admired that you have had a chance to either work with professionally, or you've ever had a chance to like meet or like, you know, talk to them like at a Q&A after a film festival or something like that. And what was did you have a takeaway from that experience that you really responded to? And I don't know if all 5 of you actually have an example for this, so I'm just going to throw it out there and then see who wants to respond.
When I was working as a PA on the Netflix series One Day at a Time, I got to meet director Pamela Fryman, and she's basically directed like every episode of How I Met Your Mother, but like 10. She's like a sitcom legend. And I learned a lot from her directorially, but I really learned from her how to run a set and how to treat people right. And I learned that from her saying thank you isn't enough. And that means, you know, coming to set prepared, you know, wrapping on time so people can go home and have dinner and aren't driving home in the dark. And she really just taught me how to like be a good person in that sense. And that's helped me way more as a director by any means than anything creatively I've learned from, you know, some of my heroes. So
Winter, you're up next. Go for it.
I've got two folks. One was Ethan, actually, in the sense where when we were first doing that film, I remember I came up, and by crew, I mean me and him, and then the kid actor and some sandwiches. Okay, this is like OG days. All right, I was like 14. And I remember I came through, and you know, Ethan and I have a really great creative trust, mutual creative trust built up, right? Where he really knows where I'm at and I really know where he's at, right? Telepathy, blah, 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 all that stuff. And we've worked together for quite some time as sort of co-writers, co-historians, whatever you want to call it. So we were there, and I show up and he's like, so where's your shot list? And I was like, right here, I've got it all in my head. And he's like, I believe you, except for, he says, right now it's me and you and that kid, but someday you're going to be a part of like 40, 50, 60, hundreds of people crew. Largest crew I've directed for so far was only 60 people, right? But obviously, like, you know, it continues to grow. And so he ended up being right. He said, someday you're going to have so many people and you're going to know what's in your head, but you're going to wish that you just had something to look down at and center yourself. So that was a big moment. Second one would probably be, when I was actually at a NFFTY panel, and there was the producer of Hidden Figures, which is a movie I respect deeply and is absolutely the niche that I write and go for, right? These real historical events created in these really big epics. And I remember this producer on the speech said, hey, like, know what you're good at and be okay with that. You know, if you're not cut out to be a director, that is okay. And everybody kind of some people shifted, some people didn't. And he said, if you are uncomfortable right now, you know, you have your answer. And I remember just like staring at him, because I was very sure about that answer, not in an egotistical way, but just like, okay, that makes sense. You know what I mean? I can't draw, I can't swim, never going to do those things, right? But I can do this one thing. And so he came up to me after the fact and was like, you didn't put your head down. And I was like, nope, I did not, sir. And he was like, here's my card, please email me. So I did do this. And what I appreciate most about people is their honesty. So I remember he had emailed me and said, I'd like to see what you've got. And so I let him know what the scripts that I have. And he said basically that he would absolutely love to read it. But the thing is that, right, basically that if in the future, right, another similar film were to come out, it was basically the same, you know, I would have to be okay with that. And so I said, thank you so much. I would love nothing more for you to read this, but I'm not going to send it to you. And I'm so appreciate your honesty. And I believe we will cross paths again in the future. And so that was like a very, very big moment. I really appreciate that honesty, because people with great power can definitely just like snatch stuff. And he chose not to, but warned me that may be a possibility. So I was really, I think actually have more respect for people like that who are really, really honest and don't regret that decision at all.
Leaning towards, for me, like more, especially writing, but also producing, being able to curate an experience or bring people together in a way that's, I really appreciate like the behind the scenes aspect of things. And that's why I was more gravitated towards filmmaking, not necessarily wanting to be in front of the camera or do all these things, because there's just something about doing something and not expecting to getting credit out of it, but doing it because you want to. And I really like those kinds of people who sort of like work in the shadows a little bit, and kind of lift up other people. So when I worked as an assistant for the Osbournes for 2 years, and Sharon, working with her, she is just an absolute powerhouse, and the sweetest woman ever. And to be at her level and to have the responsibilities that she does, that's the last thing I expected working with her. And yeah, even like I would work out of Ozzy's house very frequently. And if you know the story behind, you know, his rise and everything, Sharon was there every step of the way, and she made what he is just as much as he did, if not more, in my opinion. I mean, she was so amazing. And that really instilled in me a lot of like, you don't have to be cutthroat. You don't have to be like sociopathic to really make a difference, to really rise in that sense. You can do it with being very respectful and kind, and I think that's obviously a much more effective way. And I think when we're younger, it's really easy to see or hear things about very successful people who have gotten there because of questionable things that they've done, or the ways they've treated people, or whatnot.
I love that. What a great surprise example. I was not expecting Sharon Osbourne to come out tonight, but I'm very happy to hear that she's a very nice person. Ian, Lauren, either of you feel up to go next? Anything to add to that?
I can. It's so funny. The person who I met, who's my idol, is who I'm flying out to see tonight. I'm going to London, and unfortunately, I can't say their name because I'm currently working with them, and there's an NDA, and they have crazy fans. But the biggest thing that I learned from working with this person, and genuinely, I was, again, very afraid to meet them, because I was like, oh God, I'm such a fan of them, and if they disappoint me, I'm going to be heartbroken. And it was the most pleasant surprise that wasn't the case. And she just, it just genuinely, like, it kind of goes back to like all the way in the beginning, what Ian was talking about, is like the hierarchy of needs and things. Like, you know, I've been flying back and forth to London to be with her and work with her. And there was a day where she had a very intense thing happening where it was like going to be in the public eye, all these things. And I was having a horrible day, and I was trying so hard to not let it show. And it was like that thing where you can like feel the tears like right there, but you're like, don't do it, you know? And I'm like, cause I'm like, you know, don't be like, so, like, she has so much more going on, so much, you know, her life is insane right now. Like, to even try and like, you know, I don't want her to know that I'm having a hard time. And she just looked at me and was like, you okay? I was like, yeah, you know, and then someone asks you that, you're like, no. But I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I think I'm just, you know, kind of jet lagged and, you know, like BS excuses. And she was like, you know, she was like, you've seen me taking, like, she has this like giant thing of vitamins. And she's like, there's a reason that, like, you know, if someone's standing, I'll be like, hey, you know, I need a minute. Or like, you know, she's like, you cannot be here and do this if you're not taking care of yourself. She goes, why don't you just take the day off today and just rest and do whatever you want? She's like, are you good? Do you want food? Like anything like that? And I was like, no, I'm okay. I can go with you. It was like this big thing. She really wanted me there. And she was like, no, I got it. You know, she's like, I want you to take care of yourself, because like, I need you here and happy. And like, I care so much about how you're feeling right now. And I can tell that you need a day to breathe. And I was like, it just meant the world to me. And it made me be like, oh yeah, there is no like right or wrong way. In the same way, I think Ethan, you just said about the cutthroat thing. So I remember thinking, like, if I cry right now, like, it's totally giving away that, like, you know, mentally, like, I can't handle this and I'm too fragile and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And all these other things that I think a lot of women specifically deal with, and being like, I really, really want to prove my worth of being here, and like I can be just as hardcore as everyone else. And to just have that. And she was like, you're not gonna last if you just keep that mentality. She's like, you just have to be honest with yourself. And you know, Cal said it too, but like big proponent of therapy, and just like really understanding that like you don't have to just like shut down all of your emotions to prove that you know can make it this far. And that really like stuck out to me a lot, and it made all the difference. And now it makes me want to implement that in my everyday, you know, not just on sets or things like that.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. All right, Ian, we started with you. Close it out. Here we go. It comes full circle.
Oh my gosh, the stage is set. You know, I don't think there's an instance where I've like met like one of my like heroes. Like I would love to meet like the Wachowskis or, you know, Kurosawa, but he's not alive. But I'll add a little bit of a twist to what everyone's been saying. So right now we work with a lot of celebrities regularly who come in and we collaborate and make an audio collection. And coming into this job, I'd never worked with talent before. And I think I always had like a sense of how incredible these celebrities are, and they just know how to do so much and just juggle everything, and just, you know, just it's the amount of things they're able to juggle, and just the image they project. It's like, it's just superhuman, and you perceive them as like larger than life. And it's been very sobering and very a relief to meet some of these folks behind the scenes and realize behind a celebrity is like teams of people. And they're essentially a company where there are experts whose job it is to project an amazing image, to get all the business deals. And you'd be surprised at, in some cases, how little these people actually do. And not in a derogatory way, but just how normal they are is what I'm saying. And so it's been a relief to see behind the scenes. There's a lot of machinery going on behind all the image and the facade. And I no longer believe in larger than life people. It just, I just doubt it exists. I think everyone's pretty normal, and everyone just has a particular skill set. And when you gather a couple folks who have particular skill sets, you can create something that creates an image that's larger than life. But the reality is, you know, it's probably a small group of people doing that, you know, who are just normal like you and I. So that's been humbling to realize.
Well said. I mean, seriously, sorry to interject, but it's so true. I think like people will disappoint you, all people, you know what I mean? And that's okay. You know, we're all infallible humans, and all of those like, right, great stars that we look up to were once literally exactly like all of us, you know? So in some sense, we are the talent now, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a crazy situation. Yeah.
I like that. We are the talent. Yes.
I love that. All right. Well, that's our time. It doesn't look like anybody popped in any questions in the Q&A. So I think I had a bunch that I didn't get to, but I was so enraptured with everything that everybody was sharing. So maybe if I have follow-up questions, I've got you. I'll follow up. But for anybody else that wants to know more about y'all, we've got some of your films streaming as part of the summit right now, and some short film showcases, and like your bios and everything. Head over to nifty.org/summit 2021. We've got 2 more sessions left in the summit. Tomorrow we have Andrew Hutchison and Charles Frank from Voyager are kind of give a workshop on how they've managed to balance their creative pursuits while freelancing and starting a production company. So check that out. And then we've also got the filmmakers behind Call Me Intern leading a discussion about how we change the culture of unpaid work in the film industry and kind of shake things up. So 2 more strong sessions tomorrow and Wednesday. Check those out. I want to thank Ian, Cal, Ethan, Lauren, Winter. You are all incredible. Thank you so much for being here. And we'll see everybody around. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.